So Glenn, tell us the last item of clothing you purchased before I introduce you.
I bought t-shirts for the grandchildren with penguins on them.
Ooh. I love penguins. I love penguins. Okay, so what we're going to do now is everybody's going to get on mute. Everybody's going to be on mute, please. And then we're also going to turn our video off while Glenn's speaking, please, so we can save some bandwidth. Okay, let's get started. Our speaker this morning is President of EduSafe Systems, Incorporated, a management consulting firm specializing in strategic planning, board development, transition planning, and economic and community development initiatives. He is a retired university professor and administrator, and he has participated in 8 startup businesses across the country. He has long been active in educational and community affairs. He was an elected member of the Clear Creek Independent Board of Trustees and has served on numerous education and civic boards, corporate boards, community committees, economic development projects, and governance projects. Please put your hands together and welcome Dr. Glenn Freedman.
Hey. Thank you all very much. Thank you for joining us today, and I very much appreciate your time. We're going to talk about virtual productivity today. Another way of putting that is getting stuff done when you're working at home. And when I first started thinking about this presentation, the first person who came to mind was the comedian Jeff Foxworthy, who used to have as his opening act a little thing called "You Might Be a Redneck If," and everybody would fill in the blanks on a funny little thing. And I got started on this one, and I thought to myself, well, you might be a remote worker if. And so I'm going to start today with the first few little things that came to my mind when I had that tagline to start. And I'd like to encourage you to add a few as you're listening to this pitch, to just write them in on the chat room. So, for example, you might be a remote worker if you've gotten up for coffee and gone to the bathroom more than one time each in the middle of a meeting. You might be a remote worker if you envied people who are around adults all day and not just kids and pets. And somebody has their mic on, and I'm getting a lot of feedback from your mic. You could check your microphone. And there you go. Thank you, whoever that was. You might be a remote worker if you've taken a shower at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because who cares? You might be a remote worker if you wash far less laundry and far more dishes now. You might be a remote worker if you're only buying pajamas and other sleepwear. You might be a remote worker if someone asks you to do stuff in the middle of the day because, hey, you're not really working. Or you might find yourself totally exhausted, and you might be a remote worker because being exhausted means getting no sympathy from anyone around the house because, hey, you're working from home. So here we are, a whole new world. And we're going to talk about a number of things, next slide please, that relate to working at home and video conferences like the one we're doing now. I'm going to start by taking a look at some of the pluses and minuses, and you can read the rest of these as I get started chatting about them. Now, for those of you who haven't been in any of my presentations before, one of the things that you'll find is that I just use slides as a prop. They trigger the comments that I'm going to make about them, but I really don't talk about or read the slides. Having said that, if the slides are something that you want, please get a hold of the chamber. They've already got the slides, and they'll be happy to send them to you. For those of you who just want to get through this as quickly as possible, let me remind you that there are 25 slides. I put the numbers up in the corner so you can count down and see exactly where we are. Now, before we get started on any of these things, I'd like to remind you where every single one of you started becoming a remote worker. It's when your teacher assigned homework. And if you want to get a sense of how you began for your remote work experience, think back to when you had homework. What was the situation at home like? Did you have the tools you needed? Did you have the space you needed? Did you have the support you needed? What exactly happened? And very often, you'll find that some of the conditions that you had in your earliest days of homework mirror the conditions that you have now and the pros and the cons of what your remote work situation is. It's a kind of fun little activity to compare where you were and where you are. And we'll get down to the nuts and bolts of those as we go through. So you've had a chance to see what the agenda is. Let's get started. Next slide, please. Let's look at some of the pluses and minuses of remote work. Next slide, please. Now, before the pandemic, remote work was a little different than it is now because so many more people are participating these days. The pluses included the time that you had at work. A study that was reported by Bloomberg News indicated that actually people who were working from home had a longer workday, up to 3 hours longer, than the people who were actually at the office. They also had fewer meetings, no travel, which saved time and also lengthened the workday, and their work tended to be more outcomes oriented. There were cost savings, as you can see here, and interestingly enough, there were productivity gains. Some people reported, or a majority of the people reported working from home, that they had a higher engagement with their work. Maybe not necessarily with the people with whom they worked, but with the work itself. And remote workers tended to be retained at a higher level overall than people who were just going to the office every day. In addition, there were health-related benefits, as you can see here in this slide. So before the pandemic, there were a lot of increases in the kinds of areas that a manager or an owner of a business might be interested in seeing. The pandemic has changed things, and we'll talk about how it's changed things and what we can do about it. But there are some pluses. Let's take a look at some of the minuses. Next slide, please. Here are the main challenges that people have reported both pre-pandemic and currently. Isolation and all the things that go with that. You're working from home. You may or may not have family or pets or anybody else around, but what you don't have are the people that you've been around, and you're learning a whole new strategy for work. In addition to that, people report that they miss the connections that they have, the folks that they work with, their friends, the ability to get feedback just in time. There are problems with the blurred boundaries, and with that I mean the boundaries between your real life and your work life, between your family and your colleagues, the space that you have to work in, and so forth. And then there are these magical things called distractions. I want to go back to you and your homework back in the day when you were in elementary or secondary school. Think about the things that distracted you or the things that helped you get that homework done, and ask yourself whether or not they're the same sorts of things that are distracting you right now. There are plenty of them out there. So now we've taken a look at some of the big pluses and minuses. Let's move on. Did you get started? Next slide, please. Here's the key assumption that I'd like to start with, and it will form the foundation of everything we do from here on. The gist of it is there's no way to become a productive virtual employee or boss or owner without taking the time and the commitment to develop the skill to do so. There's not really much in a traditional office or store or work environment that prepares us to work at home. It's different. and it's a skill that we have to develop. And many of you over the course of the pandemic, last about 2 months, have been developing that skill on your own. My case would be, as you'll see as we go forward, is there specific things you can do to address the areas that will help you become more productive. Let me take just a moment and talk about what the things are that are at your work environment that are not in your home environment. And interestingly enough, they all start with the letter R. Every work environment has rituals and routines about how work will get done and what your role is, what your responsibilities are. They're all redefined as you're home, working on your own or with groups on Zoom or whatever other tool that you use. The reward system is different. How you define relationships varies. Interestingly enough, people who work for home as a part of the gig economy pre-pandemic, one of the things that they report is that when they finally meet someone in person, they feel like they've just gone on a blind date. That knowing someone virtually is different than knowing somebody in reality. And similarly, when we've been with people day in and day out at our workplace, and all of a sudden we're interacting online, again, the relationship is changing. When we're working remotely, one of the things that I hope you keep in mind is that your reputation is at stake every time you get on Zoom or any other tool, and every time you send in a work product or you do anything else. Your reputation is at stake. To what extent are you reliable? To what extent are you recognizing the contributions of others? To what extent are you showing the respect that you would hope to get and that others would want from you? Your reputation is on the line every time you interact. Next slide, please. Let's talk about the mindset that we have when we come into remote work or virtual productive endeavors. Next slide, please. The mindset is a little different. Here are 6 ways that the mindset is different. First, you may be by yourself, but you're never alone. You're still a part of your work environment. There may not be other people around you, but you still have those responsibilities with others. 2, you still matter. The fact that there's no one else around to give you those attaboys and attagirls doesn't mean you don't matter. You still make a difference. You still contribute to the bottom line. You still matter. And there's a tendency for folks to think that because they're not seeing others, that for whatever reason, their contributions aren't as important. Au contraire, you matter. Next, you're still accountable. And you're both your own boss and your own employee in addition to the other folks who are around. So there's that part of your mindset that maintains the accountability factor that you have when you're actually at the job site. But you also are both in charge of your own time as it goes down to the next one. You own your clock. You're in charge of your own time and you define the conditions under which you work. I'll spend more time on that in a little bit. That leads into knowing that you own your own workspace. And in a little while, we're going to design our workspace. And last but not least, in terms of the mindset, I alluded to this before, you define your own organizational culture. What are the rituals going to be? How does the rest of the family know what you're going to be doing and how you're going to be doing it? What are the rituals that you'll have? How do you reward yourself? All of these things become important and they become a part of your mindset. So as you're getting used to, or as you're defining, redefining, and moving forward as a virtual worker, you're going to find that the culture that you build, or worse yet, if you don't consciously build that culture, will affect the bottom line of what you can deliver, how well you can deliver it, and so forth. Mindset. Next slide, please. Next, I'd like to spend some time talking about the tools and the process for communication when you are a remote worker and when your productivity is measured by the outcomes that you have when there aren't other folks around. Next slide, please. At one level, communication is exactly the same as it always is, because communication is about those relationships, the ones you have with your coworkers and partners and customers and everybody else that you're interacting with, no matter how you're interacting with them. That part doesn't change. One of the things that does change, though, are the tools that you have available. You've got a great many different communication tools available to you. We'll talk about them in a minute. But in addition to those, you might find that you're using them in a different way than you may have been before. How you go about sharing things is going to be different when you're working from home. The tools are different and the processes are different. The database tools, how we keep records, and the notions of cybersecurity. Here we all are on Zoom. Notoriously, Zoom is known for transmitting or being easily hacked. And for all we know, the Chinese or the Russians or somebody have logged in. And Cindy, I hope you get their membership dues, because if they're going to be listening to all of your virtual presentations, I hope at least they're paying their dues. So you guys in China, Moscow, wherever you happen to be, pony up to Cindy. The tools are going to be different. And then last, over here, the purpose and audience and outcomes, I'd like to address in the next slide. Next slide, please. This is a really busy slide. Kind of thing that if you do download or get the slides from the chamber, I hope you spend a little bit of time taking a look at. But when we're at home, communications is different than when we're at the office. In a nutshell, there are two kinds of communication: the real-time communication, exemplified by calls, telephones, IMs, and so forth, and what's called asynchronous, or separating the messenger from the message from the recipient. And we see those in things like emails. And there are the benefits of the real time and some of the areas of concern or benefits of the asynchronous communication. My case here is going to be a very simple one. That if you are a manager or you are a person interacting with your customers on a regular basis from home, think about the channels that you have available to you and think about what the most effective one is for the given situation. Two quick examples. Almost everyone I've had a chance to talk to in the last couple of weeks said that they are zoomed out. That people use Zoom so much and so often that it was losing its effectiveness. Try the telephone. Just call somebody. It's amazing how effective that telephone may be. And it does essentially the same thing as Zoom, except without the picture. Even using the telephone's capabilities like FaceTime and Google Duo or WhatsApp or some of these others that allow for chatting with someone over the phone can be preferable to Zoom or Teams or anything else. My experience with the video calls like the one we have here is that every one of the tools, every one of the apps, every one of the applications has some pluses and some minuses. If they're overused, they begin to lose their effectiveness. Good old email, good old audio recordings and podcasts and other kinds of asynchronous devices can also be helpful. If you're the person who has set up your own work environment and you're in the middle of a project, having these video conferences or having any other kind of interruptions can be brutally devastating to your productivity. And given that you're the person who owns your workspace, having the ability to define when and how things are done is your responsibility. Now, of course, there are bosses and there are customers who can impinge on your time, but even then, you can begin to work with them to define the times that are best for you and become the most productive. Over in the examples, you'll see a bunch of examples of applications. I'm not promoting any one of those over any other one, of course, just giving them as some examples, and there are any number of them for each one of those areas. But as you are involved in communicating with other folks, come up with the right time and the right channel. At least one experience for me over the last couple months is that every one of these video call applications, that I've had to learn, there's been a curve. And there's that awkwardness when one group uses one type of application and you're used to using another, and you have all these disruptions and other issues. And I'm always wondering how many times we should have, how much time we waste just getting people up and effective on the application before it becomes useful for any of us. Next slide, please. That last slide talked about some of the tools and considerations for choosing them. But even after you've chosen those tools for your company and your environment and your way of dealing with other people, it's still helpful to have a process that works for your group. As you're looking at that slide over on the left side, it talks about the communication process, when to use a given channel, which we just chatted about. But there's also having an emergency plan. You're not together. It's harder to get the word out. What are you going to use as the primary link? Is it going to be a text message? What's it going to be if an emergency message has to go out? It's just like having a crisis management plan for anything. What's your communication go-to link that everyone knows and that everyone is aware of? And also, as a part of the communication process, what's the best time to focus on whatever issues are important at the time to the organization? And on the next slide or so, I'm going to spend some time on that. But taking a look at the process principles, you'll get a sense that there are a lot of things that you as an employee, or you as an owner, or you as a member of a team can begin to do to make the work that you do remotely more effective. Jumping down to number 7, where things are data-driven, one of the biggest areas that suffers when people are working remotely is record keeping and having notes or documentation about the decisions that have been made. And I'd like to encourage you, when you're on these calls or any other calls, if it is business oriented, to have a piece of paper and a pen or pencil at the ready to take notes and to record those notes so that there's no misunderstandings about what's due when and what the responsibilities are. I understand that that sounds like a very simple thing, but you'll be amazed at how few people actually do it. And if you don't believe me, watch people when they are on Zoom. They're looking at the screen. They're looking at you. They're looking at the books behind you to see what you're reading. They're looking at whatever the fancy schmancy little backdrop is. They may or may not be listening, and they may or may not be productive, but if you're taking notes, you'll know they're taking notes. And if you're the one who's responsible for a part of that project or part of that call, then you'll be able to send it out to people and validate whatever the outcomes were, assuming that that was the purpose of the call. Another one of the areas that at least I've seen in some of the calls I've been on are people who really don't know how to use the technology. I've alluded to it before. Saturday Night Live has done a skit on it that's magnificent if you want to see it. And it is funny, but on the other hand, it's counterproductive. It gets back to your reputation, building respect, and taking these things seriously, because you really do have work to do. There really is a bottom line. And having that training, which again, I'll get to in a few minutes, having that training becomes essential and an essential part of the process that you and your colleagues undertake. Next slide, please. If you're a manager or an owner, you also have an adjustment to make. Now, this little colorful slide has 9 different areas. Again, I'm not going to go through them all. There are a couple that I want to highlight. The first one is at the top about communicating clearly and decisively. When we're together in a room, we can read body language and we can ask quickie questions and we can do all sorts of things. If you're the manager and you're transmitting on these virtual devices, it becomes much, much, much more important, not that it wasn't already, to communicate clearly and decisively. You can follow up in writing. But there are instance after instance of people doing the wrong thing in the wrong way at the wrong time because the guidelines were not communicated in as good a way or as effective a way as they should have been. It sounds straightforward, but my suggestion to you is if you're in the position of guiding other folks through these remote sessions, write out what those directions are and practice them on either somebody at home or at the very worst, read them out to your dog or cat, because the very fact of saying them out loud, you'll realize whether there are ambiguities or redundancies or there's any room for a misinterpretation, or even better, talking to folks on your staff so that everyone is clear before you get the word out to everyone, especially customers. The second one I'd like to comment on is the other one up at the top, which is leading by example. If you as a manager are distracted and taking calls and running around during these virtual presentations, it sends a message that maybe they're not as important as the memo that set it up said that it was. What exactly is it that you want people to know about you and again, your reputation as a manager and how you lead? What does your work environment look like? How is it exactly that you're projecting or promoting yourself? And last but not least, over at number 7, last but not, I don't mean that least of these areas, the last one I'm going to mention here, is this issue of empathy, compassion, and listening. This pandemic is tough, really tough. It's hard on people staying at home. It's hard because people are readjusting their lives. It may be that folks have friends or relatives who have contracted the disease. It's a different environment that we're living in. And when back at the first set of slides, when we were talking about isolation, being at home isn't easy for everyone. They're not used to it. So as a manager, how do you exhibit empathy? How do you demonstrate compassion for what people are doing? How well do you listen to the issues as they come up and as you're talking to people? And when I talk about the blur, it's the blur between life and work and the environment that people are in now that perhaps they haven't had training for or they're not really prepared for. So as a manager, we have a responsibility, and as owners, we have responsibilities for paying attention to folks in ways that are even more difficult than they are traditionally because we're not with them and we don't have the body language and the comments and the daily observations to rely on to help us read the situation. All of these areas that I have on here, all 9 are important, but I really don't have the time to get into them all. So let's go to the next slide, please. I've talked at some length about these video conferencing meetings because it's one of the areas that people are having to adjust to. I'm going to provide some guidelines, both from the literature on video conferencing and from my experiences and conversations with people about video conferencing. Over there on the left side, where I have limited number of participants, I have found by reading the literature in this, I put fewer than an egg carton, that after you get more than 10 or 12 people on a video conference, that the effectiveness of the conference call begins to drop if what you're doing is any kind of serious conversation or work. People phase in and out, people know they can hide behind a mute button, they know all kinds of things. But after, just keep in mind that large meetings, and we're in the middle of one right now, limits participation, and it limits the kinds of things that people will have to contribute. And I'll talk about your contributions in just a second. Second, if you're going to have a meeting, have an agenda, have information in advance. What is it that people are going to want to, going to have to do? How do people begin to prepare? And how is it that we can expect a full participation at a level that we want during these video conferences? A couple of hints along these lines. Number one, if you're going to be a participant in a video conference, whether you have that agenda or not, define what you think your contribution is going to be. What exactly do you have to contribute to the meeting at hand? Second, when you respond to someone in the middle of a video, in the middle of one of these video conferences, acknowledge in a positive way the contribution that a previous speaker made before you add your contribution. Number one, it's a nice compliment to the other person to hear someone was listening and paid attention. And number two, it connects the video conference. We've all been on these conferences in which people are talking and they're not really listening. And there's so much gobbledygook going on that it's hard to reach consensus or find a consensus. You can be the person who connects the links and the nodes. The nodes are what people say, and the links are how we connect those dots. Next, write down, take notes. I mentioned this before during the meeting. When you ask yourself, what happened in that last meeting, can you answer it? If you're listening to this presentation or any other presentation, at the end of it, and somebody says, how was it? Your tendency is to say, yeah, that was good, or whoa, that really sucked. Well, that's not real helpful. If your comment is, well, here was my takeaway, and you can define what your takeaway is, it reinforces for you what the meaning of that meeting was, and it reinforces for everyone else. And now I'm going to give you my takeaway. You ready? I have two key takeaways from this whole thing. Number one, working virtually is a skill that can be developed and improved. It just has to be taught and practiced like every other skill. And number two, it starts with your mindset and works out from there. How we approach this, how we think about them, these meetings, has an awful lot to do with the effectiveness overall, or remote work has an awful lot to do with how effective they're going to be or how effective you are going to be. Okay, let's go back to this little chart and we'll go to the purple one in the middle. There's a big difference between presentations that are discussion oriented and ones that are just presentations like the one I'm doing right now. If there is a discussion, please consider someone or find someone to be the moderator. Have someone who is taking notes and listening so that these things can be recapped. Moderating is not the easiest job in the world, but it certainly is one of the more important ones. And it may not be the boss who is the moderator. It may be one of the people who is in the group who's a good listener and is able to capture and report out information in an effective way. The next one about numbers and charts, it's very helpful to have numbers and charts if you're going to be working on them. Having the numbers and charts, just having them up there tends not to be too productive. And last but not least, over in the corner, this is Glenn's view of how long these meetings ought to take. I've got a list of 6 of them here. You'll notice that some of them are 15 minutes and some of them can take up to 90 minutes. This little presentation that I'm doing, I'd put in the category of training, and it's going to be in the 45 to 60 minute range, whatever it turns out to be. But if you're finding that you're in meetings that are essentially briefings and that they're taking more than about 15 minutes, there's going to be a lot of wasted time in there. And it may be that an email summarizing what needs to be transmitted is a more effective way of getting that out. And if there are actions, hey, ask for the actions. But each one of these group meetings, video conferencing meetings, or any other kind of virtual meeting has to have a purpose. And that purpose is represented in the agenda. And we follow that agenda and we accomplish our purpose and we move forward. Next slide, please. I want to talk about Zoom fatigue for just a minute. On this graph, on this slide, is a typical Zoom collage of human beings. And look at that. They all look different. Some have headsets on, some don't. Some have fancy backgrounds, some don't. And I don't know about all of you, but I spend an inordinate amount of time looking at the backgrounds. And maybe I'm listening, maybe I'm not. But we're seeing more and more research that indicates that people are getting, it's called Zoom fatigue, but it could be any one of the tools, GoToMeeting or WebEx or anything else. People are just getting tired. So what do we do about that? Well, I've got a list over here on the side, where it's on the right side, and I'd like to add a couple of other things. One, go into these meetings with your purpose in mind. We've talked about that a little bit already, but when you wander into a meeting or any Zoom meeting or anything else, and you go in without having an outcome in mind, it's hard to tell what you're going to get. It may be nothing, it may be something. The more specific the items are that you want to accomplish, the better. And you'll be able to follow up on them. Number 2, go into these meetings with a sense of what you want to produce. At the end of the day, you're still going to be as good as what your outcomes are. Help define those outcomes. What is it in this meeting that's going to help you accomplish your set of goals? If there isn't anything there for you, you're probably going to zoom out and not get a whole lot involved. And by the way, on these charts, I don't know if you can see it on your screen or not, but at the bottom I have a lot of links. And those links, if you want these slides, are links to articles or research that I've used to develop the slide, and it gives you a lot more information than time would permit in these particular slides. The reason I bring that up now is that it's just one more video conferencing lesson. What are some of the kinds of things that I can provide for you that you may or may not need to use later that I don't have to discuss with you at the moment? And again, now I'm trying to engage you both synchronously or real time and asynchronously by using one slide and dividing out my purposes. Next slide, please. Let's spend a minute and talk about your workspace at home. The office away from the office. You're not in your 57-story building. You're at home. Let's think about that for just a second. Next slide, please. It starts by you thinking like an architect. If you engage an architect for anything, what they start talking to you about is what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, what your goals are. If you're trying to build a house, they want to know what rooms are your favorite rooms and where you spend most of your time and what you do and what your leisure activities are, and how many kids you have and whether or not you have pets and what the guidelines are in the neighborhood, and on and on and on. And they're asking you to think about your life and to think about it in a way that will enable them to design a house or a building or an apartment or an office or a retail establishment that meets your customers' needs and meets your needs. The thinking process is no different from in deciding a workspace. So here's a little picture, and there's a site down here for a group that, a reference down here for a group that works on home offices. And one of the questions for you, for every one of you, is what's your home workspace look like? And to the extent that you can, the advice that professional architects give, and that I certainly subscribe to, is to provide a serious professional workspace that reflects you and the kind of work that you do in a way that allows you to accomplish all of the goals that you have. Some of the things are relatively straightforward. For example, having your chair face the wall. One of the things that we find is that when chairs are looking out the window, you look out the window. If that's something that works for you, great. And let's go back to you and your homework assignments when you were kids. What did your workspace look like? I certainly hope your parents thought about that and designed a workspace that was for you. And for my kids, I'd like to apologize now, publicly, for not designing your home workspace. Now that that's out of the way, what are the right tools? What are the kinds of things that you need to have on the job? When you first started working from home during the pandemic, if that's your particular situation, the chances are good that you did not have everything that you needed and that there was a hiccup in productivity as you gathered the tools. Now, maybe it was as simple as a stapler, or maybe it was as important as a particular app or a database or access to certain files at the office that you didn't have access from home. Whatever it is, what are the kinds of tools that you need to have? Next, you cannot have enough backup systems. The cloud, external drives, external servers. You cannot have enough backup systems, whether it's a cybersecurity breach or it's stuff happening around the house. Hurricane Harvey was a good example. A lot of people lost a lot of data in Hurricane Harvey, lacking a backup system that you use on a regular basis. Having a good chair. It's worth investing in a chair that you can sit in for a couple of 3 hours if that's how long you have to sit in a chair. Buying the cheapest chair out there on sale, no matter where it's from, you're going to pay the price. There are certain things worth investing in. And a good chair for your workspace, if you're going to be there for any length of time, is a good investment. The issue about the lights is important. And that also applies to these virtual conferences. Take a look at what, if we were to look at the profile of all of the people on these Zoom conferences or any other conferences, look at how different the lighting is. Some people look like they're hiding in a cave, and other people are lit up like Christmas trees. Is your lighting effective, and is your workspace conducive to having these kinds of conversations? That comment I just skipped over, I'm sorry about that, about little or no personal stuff. The more personal stuff you have in your workspace, the more potential distractions that you have. Now, on one level, it's really great to have pictures of the kids and family photos of you, photos of your last big vacation and so forth. But every time you take a look at it, you're drifting away from work. So what are the kinds of things that you want to have in your workspace that keep you on task? And it doesn't have to be out of the office completely, but out of your workspace. Last but not least, no two workspaces will ever be alike. You're no different. You're different than everyone else, but yet your work has to be reflective of the values and the outcomes that you want. It will be that magic combination of design and outcomes that'll guide you. There's a question that always comes up about how much you as a person working for a company should be paying to create this workspace and how much the company should be paying. That's something that's going to be negotiated between you and the company. But having said that, if the company expectation is that you're going to be working from home on their business, they should be providing the tools that you need. How much that is going to be a negotiation. Think for a second about your desk at the office, if that's the environment that you're in. There's a chair, there's a desk. Should that be provided at home? I don't have a good answer for that because every business is going to be different with different conditions. And in every one of these situations, we're looking at work from home either as a long-term or a short-term proposition. But it's something to think about. And it's certainly something to have a conversation about at your workplace. Next slide, please. Now you'll notice that everyone who works from home seems to be wearing glasses. That's a interesting commentary on all of us, I guess. We have kids and animals, you know, they get in the way or they hindrance. At one level, it's very comforting to know that the family's there or the pets are there. And I'm going to apologize now because I forgot to turn off that little cat GIF. And I'll jump off to the next slide in a second. But the two key words are patience and professionalism. What is the image that you want to project? We've all seen these viral videos now with newspaper people with their doggies and their kitties and people who have kids bursting in on the scene. And I think almost everybody recognizes that life happens. The challenge for you is going to be how you respond to that. If your response to having a kid walk in the room is that you start screaming and yelling at a kid, whoa! If your response is calm and measured and dealing with it in a way that's effective, but yet mature and professional, that also sends a series of messages. The kids are going to show up, the pets are going to show up, distractions will happen, all kinds of things will happen. And like that telephone call that just came in, and it's how you deal with it. Next slide, please. I started off this chat by talking about training. I want to spend a little bit more time on what that training ought to be. Next slide, please. There are going to be a lot of different generations working remotely from home, from little kids to older adults, from people who are crazed over this to people who can handle it and think it's the greatest thing ever. The one comment that I'd like to make about generations and virtual work is you cannot make assumptions that old people are going to be one way and that young people are going to be another way. Everyone's going to be different. Everyone has different habits and work styles. Next slide, please. So what does that training look like? What I've put together, and I'm not going to have time to go through completely, is a guide for any of you who happen to own businesses or who work on these things in some kind of serious way, to think about who needs what? There are going to be things that are individual needs. There are going to be things the company has to do, and there are things that your clients or customers need to have. All of these areas, and my golly, look at all of this stuff. This is all a part of the training so that remote work, that virtual productivity will be more effective. Obviously, none of these things are going to happen in real time. It takes time to go through these. If you've already been working with people remotely over the years, you probably have some of these things in place, whether they're formalized or not. But there are many, many areas to think about to assure that productivity will be at its highest. Some of them I want to comment on without a whole lot of explanation. Over on the client and customer. It's important to stay connected to the people who matter to our company's bottom line. And we do that by having accountability and stewardship down in the lower right-hand corner. And by stewardship, I mean the ability to say thank you, the ability to stay connected, the ability to let them know that they matter. And all of these things are going to be adjusted if you're working from home as opposed to being at the office or being at your job site. Record keeping is one of the first areas that gets lost when we're working from home. And there we go. Excuse me. Record keeping gets lost. And it's incumbent on you and your colleagues to have a system for how you're going to keep records and how you're going to manage. But being able to follow up is not something that's inherently embedded in a working from home environment. That has to be developed. Back again, over to the personal side, how do we use things? How do we share things? These are part of the corporate culture, and it becomes a part of the home culture. And people ought to be able to expect to have some training before they actually are expected to deliver and be productive. A lot to consider on this one slide. Next, please. Next slide. Time to recap. Next slide, please. Everybody's in a different situation. Everybody's working through both the pandemic and these changing working environments and changing relationships. And one of the things I'd like to leave you with is a suggestion that you perform a personal virtual SWOT. A SWOT, as you probably know, is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Take a look at what that means for you. Just take a piece of paper, draw 2 lines, one vertical, one horizontal. What are the strengths of what you're doing? What are the kinds of things that are really working well? Also, what are the kinds of things that aren't working as well? And for the things that aren't working as well, what can we do to make them better? I'll give you one quick example: distractions. What really are the distractions that are keeping you from getting the things done that you want to do? Let's take a look at each one, and let's see what we can figure out to make those things better. It isn't like you're the only person out there. There are other people that you're working with or that you know or who are at the chamber that are going through the same kinds of things. How are they dealing with these distractions? If you've got 2 or 3 or 17 small kids running around the house and they're keeping you from getting things done, how are other people addressing these issues? And that's a good conversation to have, and it's going to help. Opportunities and threats have to do with the business as a whole, and also have to do with what the company may be able to do that will improve it. So start brainstorming the kinds of things that the virtual opportunities may begin to open up. Are there new lines of business that have been suggested? Are there new ways to adjust the business model? I talked about this every chance I get. if there's one thing I've noticed over the last few months, it's how many companies are tweaking their business models. Restaurants are exhibit A. Home, delivering to home, finding new customers at hospitals or schools or other places, beginning to develop new lines of businesses. There are opportunities out there just as well as there are threats. So what are the kinds of things that are hurting the business? What are the kinds of things that you might be able to tweak to help the business? And I've got to believe, because I know the chamber members are all in the gifted and talented class, I've got to believe that a lot of things have been running through your mind that can help the business overall. Next slide, please. And here are my parting thoughts, or parting shots, given that the graphic has somebody with a camera. One, I hear a lot of stuff about people who want a work-life balance, whatever that is, or they want an integrated life. I'd like to encourage you to think about work-life satisfaction, because what works for you and your family may or may not work for the next person. And it isn't about the balance, and it isn't about the integration, it's about your satisfaction. And so as you define and you talk to your spouse or your significant others or your family in general, what's the balance, what's the level of satisfaction that's appropriate for you, all other things being equal? Number two, if there are issues of isolation, and there will be, accept that those are real and address them. What are the sorts of things that we can do? I keep watching the news and seeing that in the city of Houston, we're having increased murders, increased levels of domestic abuse, increased levels of behaviors that we hadn't seen or validated before. People are stressed. Well, what are those issues? And together, how can we go about addressing them in a positive way? Number three, your avatar is you and you're your avatar. And you probably all bumped into the concept of avatar, which has emerged in gaming and other areas. Well, online, like we are now, we're not our real person. We are our virtual person. We can't reach out and touch. We can't read the body language. We can't do this. We can't do that. And so people begin to know us and identify us through this picture that you see. It's you. What's the image you want to project? If it's a professional image, how do you present yourself on that camera? If it's a laissez-faire image, bathrobes are good. But you are this image. And last but not least, and I say this as somebody who's had many employees and someone who's had few employees. If you're the owner or you're the company, they're going to take everything you have to give them. Part of your responsibilities in working at home is setting reasonable expectations, what can and cannot be done. And those are mapped against what you were doing on the job when you were there every day at the workplace. And they're also mapped against the reality of this homework environment that you're in. If you're going to work 24 hours a day, if you're going to answer the phone at 3 in the morning, if you're going to feel the need to respond to a text message at 5:37 a.m., if I'm the owner of the company, I'm darn happy and I'll keep texting you at 5:37 a.m. The company will give what you're willing to give. A company will take what you're willing to give. And the fact that you're working from home will redefine those boundaries to some extent. Next slide, please. We've covered a lot of territory in this little conversation. I don't know whether any questions came in. I don't know if I've addressed those questions, and I'm going to defer to Ava. And I'm not sure even where the questions came in. Montalia, I guess that's you. If there are questions, I'll be happy to respond. And with that, I'd like to thank all of you for your kind attention. I hope we covered the things that you thought were interesting. And look forward to seeing your comments. Put them down there. And also, don't forget, you might be a remote worker if, come up with your own snarky response. Thanks, Ava.
Thank you so much, Glenn. Thank you. So Montea, I know you took some questions earlier. Do you have anything? I'm looking at the chat box and all I'm seeing is just good comments about how great this is and that everybody would like to, a lot of people would like to have the slides later. Montea, do you have any specific questions?
I did not get any questions prior to the meeting.
Okay, great. So if anybody getting good stuff, thank you very much for everything. This was wonderful, Glenn. And so we'll go right to the chamber announcements. Is that going to be Jenny? You're going to give us some chamber announcements?
Yes, ma'am. So we still have a lot of things going on at the chamber, business as usual. Just a quick announcement about what's happening later this week. We have the Young Professionals group getting together, having a virtual 90s party tomorrow for their regularly scheduled lunch bunch. So that's tomorrow at 12 o'clock. We'd love to have you guys join us. Feel free to make a reservation online. We also have another COVID-19 webinar Thursday, May 7th at 10 o'clock, talking about growing after personal and professional challenging times. So a little bit of self-care we want to talk about. The following week, May 13th and May 14th, we have webinars scheduled as well. So Young Professionals is going to be leading the way May 13th, hosting a Young Professionals webinar about creating momentum in this time of renewal. And then we're going to be talking about re-engaging and preparing your employees to return to work on the 14th. So lots of things going on. Also want to let you guys know we have officially rescheduled our Buy Into Bay Area Business and Wellness Expo for August 20th. So mark your calendars. We'll be sending information out about that soon. Julia is our chair and she and Sherry can answer any questions you guys might have. Or if you're interested in participating, we definitely want to talk. Ava, that's all I have. I mean, there's lots more going on the chamber side, but check the website for continual updates.
Continue to look at your emails and pay attention to what's going on. Yes, she does want to say something. If you want to say something, you got to turn your speaker on, Sherry. Sherry, do you want to say something?
No, I was just excited that we talked about the Business and Wellness Expo. So woo-woo!
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so with that, it looks like we don't have any questions. So thank you very much, Glenn, and everybody go out and have a fantastic or a tremendous Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.